Hello team, welcome to another ATB Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, second part thereof, third part thereof, fourth part thereof, a part for the 17th of May 2024. We're going to start with Robin Brooks talking about Germany. Growing up in Germany in the 1980s, the number one lesson that was drilled into me and every other student at the Humboldt-Schule in Bad Homburg was there can be no moral ambiguity ever in the face of evil. Yet here we are. These pictures of German exports fill me with shame. I'd have to say, so I'm not one that massively blames like a whole nation for these things. And I do keep trying to explain that it's just really difficult to stop this from happening. But something has to change. So, and it won't only be Germany. So this is looking bad for Germany, but every other nation will be doing versions of this, in the US included. But it's mainly going to be European nations in terms of some of those more standard exports that like cars and whatnot to Russia that can't go to Russia directly. So here we have Kyrgyzstan. Imports as far as Kyrgyzstan are concerned, so exports from Germany to Kyrgyzstan to Armenia really ticking upwards there. Georgia as well involved, Kazakhstan involved, Turkey, although it's less pronounced, they had more of an existing export industry to Kyrgyzstan. Azerbaijan, interestingly, went down after 2015 into 2016. Don't know why that would be, but then a little tick up after 2022. So this is a real challenge. It's a challenge for all Western nations who are seeking to hamstring Russia in terms of being able to fund their war in Ukraine. Something has to be done here, but you understand that an exporter is going to, these entities are involved in making profits. That's a raison d'etre. Morality comes second. Like I've said to you before, and I've written many articles on this, the free market is not interested in morality. The only way that free market is determined by morality is if individuals within the free market are determined by morality. But unfortunately, when you pit morality against profit, or even morality against cost, profits and costs win over morality. We know, just simple consumer behaviors will show you this. So I remember 2008. In fact, at the time, I was a really ethical consumer, even more so than now. It's just my brain is full of too much stuff. But I was really into buying, I was having these huge debates like, well, do I buy local, organic, or seasonal? Which is the most beneficial? And what's my metric of ethics here? Is it air miles? Is it carbon footprint? Is it pollution, seasonality, and or local produce? I'd go around the supermarkets, just taking me about 3 hours to do a simple shop. I was having these debates with myself about how I could be the best version of myself. But at the time in 2008, the supermarkets in the UK were really big on fair trade goods and organic goods, and I remember Sainsbury's having an incredible organic range. And then what happened is the .com bubble imploded, and you had a global recession, and all the supermarkets in the UK stopped selling large swathes of those kinds of range. Why? Because people were hard up for cash more, and so you are driven by cost, and you can't afford to make those moral choices. Those moral choices come with a greater cost often, and that's really frustrating. That to be a better person, you have to spend more money. It's like really, really frustrating. Anyway, point is that when it plays against cost or morality, you generally go for the cost as being more important, unless you've got heaps of disposable income. And so if you're just super rich, you can afford, or if you're well off or not well enough off, you can go with moral, ethical choices, right, much more easily because you've got that disposable income. And we are just very much driven by cost. And when it comes to corporations, you are driven by driving down your costs because you know that that will attract more people to buy your goods. And also you want to drive up your profits, and those two are obviously linked. And that's why you do what you do, unless you are essentially an ethical brand. So when it comes to these corporate entities these merchants wanting to make money, they're going to say, right, we make widgets, we're not allowed to sell widgets to Russia, but someone else is buying these widgets, and they weren't buying these widgets before. It was the Russians that were buying these. Now we can't sell them to Russia. No, this random dude is buying a load of these. I don't know what he's going to do with them, or maybe I can have a guess, but we need to make money. And like, if we make more profits, then not only the shareholders happy, but we as a company keep going. Or I get a bonus. Like, personally, I benefit off this. So it can be a situation where the more stuff that we sell to Kyrgyzstan at the moment, the more money I make as an employee or as a CEO or whatever of this enterprise. And that's what dictates human behavior far more easily than morality. Unfortunately, it's just the way we are. Everyone has a price. And so what has to happen in order to get the right thing, the right outcome, we have to regulate. And I know some people don't like this, but, and I could bore you because talking about like the economics of negative externalities and whatnot, but the free market, like I've said a million times before, the free market cannot arbitrate for morality. It's just the way it is. I might link some of my articles on this to you. So I originally wrote this series back in 2015 and then reposted it in 2018 and then subsequently. So it's quite an old one. This is one of the last ones in the series. But you can see how long just this article was. Just an absolutely, huge article there. It's still going. But anyway, the first part on free market economics, history, morality, and background, I talk about the idea of negative externalities, which is when you make a widget and you cause an extra cost in making that, perhaps to the environment, perhaps to health. It's usually not you that picks up that cost. Whereas if it is a negative externality, then that cost is external to you making your widget. In other words, you are being subsidized by society and often the taxpayer for making your widget. So you make the widget, you pollute the river, then you make extra profit from polluting the river. It's cheaper for you to make this and pollute the river than not pollute the river and having to clear up and spend your money clearing it up. So you pollute the river, and then society has to bear the cost of that. Or if they want to clean it up, then the government cleans it up. And the cost of you making that widget is borne onto the taxpayer, right? And the free market can't arbitrate for that unless human beings just recognize that, but it requires that they have the knowledge of what's going on there when they're buying the stuff, and it requires that they don't prefer cost over moral dimensions. And we know that humans are not very good at that, so they won't choose the more expensive widget that doesn't pollute the river generally than the less expensive one that does. And the only way they could find that out is if the labeling was on there, and the only way they could find out it was regulated that they have to put on the label that they polluted. So they won't, obviously they'll generally lie. So the Homo economicus, the idea of like the perfect consumer is knowledgeable about everything, is nonsense. It doesn't exist. Homo economicus, as the Chicago boys, economists or whatnot, and Milton Friedman, they base free market economic theory on that human being doesn't exist, and so therefore we don't have that knowledge, and we make the bad decisions, and that favors effectively cheaper goods made often by having cheap labor, polluting, blah 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 blah. So what you have to do, the only way of sorting that out is if the government comes along and says, right, we're going to make a rule, we're going to regulate so that if you pollute the river, you get fined or you have to pay to clear it up or whatever. And then that stops this widget manufacturer from doing that. And yes, it will possibly raise the cost of that, but the costs, that's necessary because the costs were otherwise on other people. Now the costs are on the widget maker for, so that they can't do that. Slightly more expensive, but then that's borne by whoever's demanding the very good that they are producing. So many of these taxpayers wouldn't have demanded the widgets, but they have to pay for the widget manufacturing because of the damage it does to society, to third parties, etc., etc. So that's negative externalities, and the nature of economics is that the only way that you can stop negative externalities from being borne on the third party is to force those negative externalities, those negative external costs, back onto the producer. So coming back to this, right? The only way we can sort this out is by regulating, right? This is the natural human behavior. That's why I don't blame the companies, or yes, they are moral shortcomings, but it's just human nature, right? So what we have to do is, as governments or international organizations or intranational organizations like EU or WTO or whoever, we need to get together and say, right, the onus is on you now in when you sell this to have knowledge of who you're selling it to, and if you have got good reason to know that is going to Russia, then we're going to screw you over. You are going to have to pay for that as sanctions. We're going to hit you with fines or whatever, and it's regulation is the only way around this. There is no other way. So we just have to make sure that we are super regulating and keeping a really close eye and enforcing the rules concerning sanctions. And one of the ways that we've seen previously is with banking or financial institutions that give money towards people who are buying and selling and whatever. If they know that if they've got a pretty good sense that money is going to go towards activity that enables Russia to prosecute their war, then we can punish the financial organizations as much as we can, the manufacturing and the exporting organizations, etc., etc. Anyway, large digression. I better get on with this quickly. But it's that time of year. I meant to share this with you a couple of days ago when it came out, but you know what, mate? Oh, mean choice, mate. Look, really great that New Zealand is really coming through on this. I really like my fish and chips, and look, cuz, it's really great, when you see sanctions from New Zealand really do a good job of making sure that New Zealand are playing their part in really making Russia pay for what they're doing. It's choice that they're doing this, and all right, bro, I better stop with this crazy accent now. Thanks, New Zealand. Announcing on May the 16th a new package of sanctions against 28 individuals and 14 entities over their support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Nice one, bro. Okay. US imposes sanctions on Russians who helped transport weapons from North Korea to Russia. The US Treasury on May the 16th imposed sanctions against Russian citizens who helped Russia get weapons from North Korea. Excellent stuff there. We have the European Union is set to add Voice of Europe, RIA Novosti, Izvestia, and Rossiyskaya Gazeta to the 14th sanctions list against Russia, according to the EU Commissioner for Values and Transparency, Vera Jourova. In fact, I think that has now been done and passed. So they have been. EU Council said that these media outlets are controlled by the Russian state and their work is aimed at destabilising neighbouring countries. Excellent. Again, you might talk about freedom of speech, etc., but this is where regulation has to be put in place in order to arbitrate for morality. Right? It's what governments do, because human behaviour is not good enough. We are not knowledgeable enough to decipher when we are being manipulated or not, or at least some of us might be, but large swathes of the population aren't. And in the absence of human behaviour being good enough on its own, We need to have regulations put in place, and that might affect freedom of speech, but it is for the better of society. It's your moral consequentialism. You might have a slight evil or a slight bad element to freedom of speech is constrained, but that's completely overwhelmed by the positives that come out of that, which is I'm not getting manipulated by Russia. So yeah, Voice of Europe might not be able to say what they like, but being a Russian entity, and freedom of speech is constrained there, but they're also just a bunch of numbnuts that are trying to manipulate us into doing bad things. So that's a good thing. Right, Microsoft has started blocking Russian corporate clients from using its cloud services in compliance with Western sanctions, a Russian distributor of the tech company's products, Softline, said. This is good news because I did hear earlier in my previous video that Microsoft might be getting back to usual in terms of its behavior vis-a-vis Russia. And moving on, if I can get the right screen open, Rebar, the pro-Russian source here saying British shadow ministers in Kyiv. Now, I use these guys because I hadn't heard this from anywhere else. So our shadow ministers, as in opposition ministers, representatives of the UK Labour Party, should be with the U because, hey, it's the UK, arrived in Kyiv. That would have been, yesterday. Among them, the Shadow Foreign Minister David Lammy and Shadow Defence Minister John Healey. As far as I'm aware, John Healey is quite well respected and would be a decent decent Defence Minister in the event that Labour get voted into Parliament. And every poll and the local elections look like that is some kind of certainty, whether it be in coalition or a straight up election win. Is still to be defined, I guess, but there seems to be virtually no chance of the Conservative Party maintaining power. During their 2-day trip to Ukraine, they met with the heads of military and foreign policy departments, as well as the head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak. And this, again, talks to how Britain has such great bipartisan support for Ukraine, that our opposition leaders are out there going, right, what can we do to help when we're in power? Like, this is so different from other countries, particularly the US, where you have had some bipartisan delegations come over, but no kind of delegations on behalf of the Republican Party, maybe from a diktat from, say, Trump saying, right, we need to get some delegates out to Ukraine so that when Republicans are voted in November, we can hit the ground running and make sure that we can continue support for Ukraine. That's never going to happen because, as we know, it's completely partisan. Well, it's not completely. They've actually had incredibly good bipartisan support through Congress, but there are elements of partisanship that are really vehement, and unfortunately the element that is most vehement is the one that's surrounding Trump and the MAGA Republicans. So anyway, the British promised to maintain the current level of military aid to Ukraine until at least the end of the decade, and reaffirmed the commitments made by the current government. So it's really, really good news. In Great Britain, the system is organised in such a way, in the case of winning an election, the leader of the party becomes Prime Minister and appoints a cabinet from among his fellow party members. The leader of the opposition faction does the same and appoints his shadow cabinet, which oversees the running of the government. In practice, David Lammy and John Healey now play the role of critics along the lines of the UK Foreign Office and Defence Ministry. However, there will soon be a general election in which the opposition will win. In that case, Lammy and Healey could become real ministers. They probably would. So Labour is also building bridges with the Ukrainians. Of course, we should not hope for significant changes in London's policy on the Ukrainian issue after the change of the ruling party. Still, Ukraine is a global project, so its implementation does not depend on who is currently at the helm in the UK. Says Rebar, very pro-Russian source, but broadly correct there in the main body. Russian Foreign Ministry declares British Defence Attaché persona non grata. We knew this was going to come because the UK had done that to the Russian Defence Attaché, who had been acting basically as an espionage agent. So now we banned them, and now Russia's gone back and said, the decision is retaliatory measure following the UK's expulsion of the Russian one on May the 8th. This week, the UK, so staying on the UK theme, 3 people under the new National Security Act for aiding Chinese intelligence were arrested. GCHQ said it devoted more resources to China than anything else. So China is now becoming a much greater, I guess, espionage, cyber warfare, information warfare risk. It grows each passing month. However, interesting here, crunch the numbers on what MPs and peers, so peers are the Lords and Dames in the House of Lords. So we have two, rather like there is the Senate and the House of Representatives. In American Parliament, it's slightly different because the House of Lords is not elected and it is bloated and there are far too many of them. We need to, if we're going to keep it, you need to slice a load of them off. They get selected by the ruling party, and so it just gets skewed each time the ruling party's in, and blah blah blah, and then you get 29 bishops that are there because God or something. So anyway, House of Lords has its problems, but it does work to balance the House of Commons, which is where the elected MP 650 of the around Britain, the United Kingdom, are elected to, and so they both work together. Anyway, in debates since 2020, there have been 81 on Russia, 36 on China, Iran 53, North Korea 2. So this is the time spent debating different countries in the world since 2020. And I think this is really interesting. Ukraine, actually, it says 199. I don't know what the number of parliamentary debates. Yeah, so no, actually, when was this? The numbers are very different there. Oh no, 81 on Russia. Sorry, 81 on Russia. But of course, Ukraine is going to be to do with Russia. So you could say Ukraine is 199 and Russia's 81. That's going to be almost 200 for Russia, essentially, because they'll be part of the Ukraine one. Israel 75, Iran. Interesting that we are very much concerned with what's going on in Russia and what's going on with Ukraine. And that continues. And we are doing our very best to debate these issues. Like I showed you with the Select Committee hearing with Bill Browder the other day, just really good quality information being fed to our MPs so our MPs can make informed decisions. Then they go and debate it in Parliament, and then we get hopefully decent regulation, decent policy that is enacted as a result. Going across to the Netherlands, we have Geert Wilders has come out. I meant to report this yesterday, but it's the links went missing. Netherlands incoming coalition government reaffirmed support for Ukraine. So although there was a bit of a worry with Geert Wilders' far-right PVV party being the major party, initially it wasn't looking like he was going to be involved in making a coalition because people weren't going to do a coalition with him. But actually the arrangement has been that none of the leaders of each of those parties can be prime minister. So I don't know who's going to be prime minister actually. Maybe someone Dutch can tell me, or maybe it hasn't been decided yet, but there's been an agreement of the coalition at least, and that got through just in time for the cutoff for that. And the PVV will be involved, and they were big on Nexit, which is Euroscepticism coming out of Europe, which would have added to European disunity, but they've gone back on that. They've said, we've looked at Brexit and that's such a cock up that we're not going to do it. So just a bit of a reality check there to people in the UK, I guess. And also they've gone back on positions on Ukraine, which is very interesting. And I think this is the joy of coalitions, is that the extreme elements of any coalition get tempered and there's compromise that has to be made. So you would have had other parties going into coalition with PVV saying, we'll come into coalition with you so that you can get into government. So you need us, but you've got to change your position on Ukraine. It just has to happen. And so that seems to be what has happened. So Wilders opposed military aid to Ukraine, but in the draft agreement is written that, quote, the Netherlands continues to support Ukraine politically, militarily, financially, and morally against Russian aggression. So we'll wait to see how Geert Wilders' party acts in power in terms of their overall politics. I'm obviously not going to be a big fan of them, but their positioning, their changed positioning on Ukraine is definitely good. That's excellent. They've compromised that. Right. So there's going to be the peace conference in the peace summit, Ukraine peace summit in June 15th and 16th. Two leaders aren't going to be there, South African leader and Brazilian leader. Of course, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So they are members of BRICS, but you would have expected them to be there. I'm disappointed in De Silva there, the Brazilian leader. Ramaphosa, doesn't surprise me. South Africa seemingly provided arms to Russia throughout the war, so they are, that's a real shame. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has argued that Ukraine's ongoing EU accession negotiations and continued international support, both of those indicate that corruption levels are not as high as often portrayed, especially by Russian propaganda, according to Ukrinform. And there is something in that. It's like, well, if the EU are happy and you've passed these stages and you go on to this stage and then they are saying you need this transparency, you need that, and they're arresting people that are being found for corruption, then actually it can't be as bad as Russia are claiming. Now, this is bad. Do not like this. So Hungary has vetoed the Council of Europe resolution on Ukraine because it provided for the recognition of only one peace plan. So it's basically put a kibosh on a peace plan being offered for Ukraine. And this is absolutely freaking objectionable. And that's not strong enough as a word. Hungarian foreign minister has said, so it provided for the recognition of only one peace plan. In other words, it's saying, yeah, we're not a big fan of this peace plan because it's not taking into account what Russia want out of this. Which is to say that, imagine you've got an old woman getting mugged on the other side of the road by the thug. We go back to that analogy. You say, right, stop it. Right. So the police come along, say, right, you're going to stop that. Okay. Right, we're going to have peace. And then the policeman says, right, you're going to give her her wallet back. And blah, 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 blah. And this is what's going to happen. And then other people looking on and saying, hang on, you're not taking into account what the thug wants. What about what the thug wants to do here? He wanted some of that money from the old granny there, from old Doris. What about... we want Doris to give some of her money to the thug, because I can't believe you're not taking into account the peace interests, the interests of the thug. Just who do you think you are, Mr. Policeman? Upholding the law? You heard about that? It's absolutely ridiculous. Hungary, what are you doing? What are you doing? No, because it's not all of Hungary, but that government, goodness me, Viktor Orban, Mr. Toady McToadface, needs to sort himself out. Right, the border between Estonia and Russia. This isn't news, particularly. I mean, it's something that's happened. But I love it. This is the border. That way is Estonia. Over there, that's Estonia. And then to the left, as it swings to the left, we see Russia. And there appears to be some kind of Russian gig going on with Russian-held flags and la, but actually hardly anyone's up there. Most people seem to be looking at what's across the river, which are flags of Ukraine hanging from the castle, flags of the EU, flags of Estonia, and, of course, a Putin is a war criminal or whatever poster there. Putin, war criminal. There you go, Russians, take that. And the final bit of news I'm going to share with you concerns the shooting of Slovakian Prime Minister Fico, who is still, I think he's stable, but still not out of the woods, but it looks like he probably will survive. He seems to have been shot by a lone wolf who... I haven't seen anything against the claim that he was pro-Russian, so that's interesting. And you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene weighing in from the US in her normal wingnut way that she does, saying that this is great and courageous, as in Robert Fico here, and no wonder they shot him. I pray he makes a full recovery. So why does she love him? Because he said some anti-vax stuff. So he had said he rejects the World Health Organization proposed pandemic accord. This is back in whenever. Or actually, no, it seems like that. Oh, no, I think the video was back at some point originally. But anyway, he was maybe not. But anyway, he's a kind of anti-vaxxer, anti-World Health Organization getting involved in trying to sort out future pandemics. And she's like, this is great and courageous because she's, anti-vaxxer herself. So there you go. That's her views on Robert Fico's assassination attempt. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. Goodness me, it's Friday. Go and enjoy yourselves. And I'll get back to you with some mapping updates at some point today. Toodle pips.